good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're watching Out Here in the Redwoods. I'm your host, Denise Riles. And for everyone here, aloha means hello and goodbye. And I want to thank Christina Anastasia for this little lovely hair ornament because it is a special night. Tonight we're going to begin the first of a two-part segment on polygamy today. And ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the reality show Sister Wives. It's not all fun and games. And guess what? We have somebody real and in person to talk to. You know her, I love her, the fabulous Rebecca Kimball. Aloha, Rebecca! And you have your own talk show here on Access Humboldt.
I do,
You
yes.
do. And when I met you, whoa, you threw me a curveball. Because as we started talking about how you got into television production and motivational speaking, you said, I have to start from the beginning. I was in a religious cult. You were one of those sister wives. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And you have been all over talking about this subject and what really happens behind closed doors and your own story.
I want to define the concept of sister wives to clarify a point.
Sure, absolutely.
Because
we need to clarify a lot, yeah.
There's a great misunderstanding that the first wife is not under the same bondage and slavery and damnation if she isn't compliant as any other wife. Yeah. I am fifth generation polygamist born.
Fifth generation?
Fifth generation.
Wow.
I am one of 39 children born to my father's 6 wives.
Wow.
And my mom was married, if you want to call it married, 2 marriages were not legal, 3 different times in her life, and the 3rd time she was married to another polygamist that had several wives and several children, and I have to be really honest, I have no idea how many stepbrothers and sisters I have through that family. The point being that we were reared from the day of our birth to believe that we were God's chosen people on earth. We had holy bloodlines from Christ. The rest of the world was totally evil. That we must live polygamy or be damned for time and all eternity. And we were taught that the only way that we could be saved if we didn't live polygamy was to have our own blood shed, because Jesus Christ did not die for our sins, we had to die for our own.
And there's a term for that.
Yes, it's called blood atonement.
Blood atonement, that's right.
If a man kills you to save your soul, it may be illegal by the law of the land, but it's, according to God, it's okay. Now, you got to understand that the reason that these men live polygamy is they believe they're going to be a God in eternity.
Where do you get this idea? This is a fundamentalist concept, right? What religion does that come from?
This came from the fundamentalist doctrines of the Mormon Church back in the days of Brigham Young.
Brigham Young. So there's a prophet Joseph.
Yes, and he founded the church.
Is this where the idea comes from this prophet Joseph?
Yes, it did. Now, a lot of people don't want to deal with that, but the truth of the matter is that the early church sermons were kept and documented and put in volumes. They're called the Journal of Discourses. There's 26 volumes, and they were the property of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and really kept undercover, so to speak, when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints signed a document in 1890 to become a state, and in so doing, they had to abandon polygamy. So they did abandon polygamy, and they no longer endorsed polygamy in this life. However, a lot of polygamists that were Mormons at that time went underground, and one of those was my grandfather.
Oh my God.
And my grandfather was the youngest congressman in Wyoming in the United States. He was 22 years old.
He was a congressman?
Yes, he was. But he stood up and declared that he did not break the laws of his country, which was the laws of the country not to live polygamy. It was against the state of Utah Constitution and still is, and it's against the Constitution of the United States. It was endorsed then as being akin to slavery. Now, Grandpa got around this by taking his plural wives to Mexico and Canada. And they went to Colonia Dublin, which was 6 miles away from Romney's grandpa. Because Romney's grandpa lived polygamy. So this...
Get out!
So
really? That's true?
So what has happened since then is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has evolved in another direction where the fundamentalist church evolved in another direction. Now let me define the fundamentalist church.
Okay.
The fundamentalist church claims and blames Mormonism. That doesn't mean Mormonism is responsible for their behavior. They claim and blame Mormonism because it works. They can hold the state of Utah and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints hostage and prevent them from doing much about polygamy because they can blame it on to the early Mormon polygamists.
Wow.
And if you follow the trail of what I'm about to tell you, you will know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not endorse the crimes of modern-day polygamy.
Oh, wow.
Now, there are several prophets that claim to be the one and only prophet of God on earth, the only mouthpiece. And these different prophets are leaders of different polygamous groups. And there's about 20 of them or more because they're expanding. And they're all the only one that's right. But they send their daughters back and forth between each other to marry in the different groups so that they can expand the bloodlines. Because children that are raised in polygamy and know nothing else are compliant because they know if they don't pretend they love it, they're evil. If they have jealousy or pain or sorrow because their husband is taking more wives and they have less and less and less and less of a husband, they're evil. Now, let's think about this for a second.
Yeah.
His multiplicity of wives makes him a god. He will people a planet with his own seed in eternity, okay? But if she isn't loyal to him and him alone, she can be damned or destroyed.
That's quite a double standard.
It's an extreme dual standard, and that's the point. That's the point. When they came up with making gay rights legal, polygamists jumped on the bandwagon and they said, come on, we'll get on the bandwagon. Why not? We'll make polygamy legal. There's no similarity.
No.
In gay rights, there's two equal partners.
That's correct.
In polygamy, there's one with more and more and more power and a diminishing power and rights and time and attention and needs for the women.
Wow.
A woman, every time he takes another wife, she has less of a husband. And now, December 13th, on 2013, Judge Clark Waddup decriminalized polygamy in the state of Utah, which was against the Constitution of the state of Utah, and still against the Constitution of the United States of America.
How did he get away with that?
It's interesting that one judge could do that.
Yeah.
It's a 91-page court document. However, it's in my office.
Okay.
And the court cases that he referred to in that document are mostly people that I know in my family. So we're going to come back to that because that document and the research that I have done is a story in itself. But before we get there.
Let's talk about some of the terminology that you use. From the beginning, you talk about family. What is pure blood?
We were taught that we had the pure blood of Jesus Christ. We're the only people on earth that did. We're God's chosen people. And all of you people out there in the evil world aren't as good as us. We're superior. We're superior because if we don't believe we're superior, there's no way we're going to suffer like we're going to have to.
Okay, all right.
So you throw a little ego trip in there and say, well, you're better than other people. And if you believe it from the time you're a little kid, and if you believe that everybody out there in the evil world is wicked, and you can't tell anybody about your lifestyle,
Right.
If you tell anybody who your daddy is, daddy may go to jail, and it'll be your fault. It'll be the child's fault if daddy goes to jail.
Oh,
Well, my daddy went to jail.
Was it your fault?
Of
course not.
My daddy suffered the consequences of his own behavior.
Good.
Now, he went to jail in 1945. And in Judge Waddup's court case, Judge Waddup said that those men that went to prison in 1945 went to prison for religious persecution. But guess what? In my office, I have pages of child brides and the cases that were brought against those men.
Oh, my.
The Mann Act for taking children, child brides, across the border.
Oh,
my father had a child bride. Every one of those men had a child bride. The men that served time in prison with my father were soon to be my father-in-law, two of my uncles, and more.
Right.
So from 1945, there was breaks in power with these men, and more polygamous groups sprung up.
Oh, God.
And nothing changed except each one was more power hungry than the next. But they still had truces over swapping daughters.
Swapping daughters?
Well, let's define it just a little bit better.
Yeah.
They wouldn't use that term. They would call it a holy covenant. And you must get married. And when you are old enough to menstruate, you better get married because you're ready. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't younger brides. Please understand that is Islam, the Prophet Muhammad had a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old bride.
What?
Yeah, you can look this up.
So essentially what you're telling me, it's almost kind of like these extreme religious groups everywhere.
Exactly.
Like the Taliban and all of this.
Exactly. You can change the title and the leader anytime you want to, but the modus operandi is the same.
So we're no different and we're not superior.
No,
we're just alike.
we are not. We are not. We'd rather look over across the sea and point a finger at them, but we don't want to look in our own backyard.
We should be looking in. You are opening my eyes. We should be looking in our own backyard. And speaking of marriage, you're not even quite sure at what age you got married.
No, I'm not. And here's the reason for that. My birth certificate is forged. All of my father's illegitimate children had forged birth certificates. And we didn't get a birth certificate for a long time. When my sister Irene came, we had to get a documentation signed to get her birth certificate. And she was probably in her 40s.
Oh, my goodness.
And the reason being, these men don't want to be responsible for the children they spawn. They want to control them and own them as their property.
Yeah.
But they don't want the responsibility because the women always go on welfare with very few exceptions. There's some exceptions, but very few. They go on welfare and act as single mothers. Now, my mom had 6 children by my father, and all of us had different last names and different names. On my birth certificate, even my parents aren't my parents.
Whoa.
But the birth certificate said that I was 15 years old when I got married.
Right.
Because in Utah at that time, my family believed that if a child was 15, it would take it out of the child molest laws, and with their parents' permission, it would simply be marriage.
Right.
However, I know of a girl that was married at 9, another one at 11, in the FLDS, and the birth certificates, who knows? Very few of them are correct. Mm-hmm. And there's no legal responsibility because there's no DNA testing.
Oh, my.
And you can't tell because if you tell or say anything or create any waves, then it's your fault that the family is punished and being torn apart and you're evil.
Right.
So you can't tell.
And according to some interviews, this kind of, what word am I looking? Grooming starts from infancy?
Yes. Yes, it definitely does. Now, for me, I never knew that I was or wasn't 15. But I will tell you this. I had 9 pregnancies, 6 living births, all except one, by the time I was 23. If I was 23,
Yeah.
And I grew 2.5 inches after the birth of my first child. Do you really think that I was 15? I don't.
No. Holy moly.
And I never knew that intimacy could be a pleasant thing until after I got away from that husband.
Oh, well, thank goodness for that.
Yes. So,
Thank goodness for that. Now, you wrote another term here, God's chosen and fumaress. What's fumaress?
fumarus is a disease caused from interbreeding. Let's go and talk about God's chosen.
Yeah,
If the polygamists, and each one of them in all the different groups, and even all of these different prophets, claim that they are God's chosen people.
Okay.
So God's chosen people go back and forth between these different cults because it's easier to get a wife to be good and humble and blindly obedient if she's already raised from infancy to be that way or be damned. So they basically traffic their daughters back and forth. They traffic them across national borders, state borders, but they traffic their daughters back and forth. And that's the way they live because they can have more wives and bring in new blood as new as it can get, but it doesn't get that new.
Right.
And that's where fumarus comes in. Fumarus is devastating. It causes all sorts of things because of birth defects and mentally and physically, okay?
Right, okay.
The highest fumarus that we know of in the world is in fundamentalist polygamist communities. That tells you how serious the interbreeding is.
Oh, man.
And they are taught, I was taught, that even if the interbreeding was close, since we're God's chosen people, it wouldn't matter. It would be solved because God's going to take care of us.
Okay.
And of course, if a woman has a child that isn't perfect, it's her fault. She sinned.
Oh, man, so they blame it all on the woman, and the man takes no responsibility at all.
Well, of course, it's up to the women to be absolutely, completely united and love each other under all circumstances and help each other out under all circumstances and like it.
Right.
Because if the guy doesn't have at least 3 united wives, and that number can change, but it's a minimum there, some say 7, etc. But at least 3 united wives, they cannot be exalted in the highest degree of glory in heaven, and he, the husband, will not reach down and pull him through the veil and pull him into eternity in God's kingdom. Now that's interesting. They've got to save him or he won't pull him through.
Oh,
now
man.
you figure out how that works, because even being blonde, I have never figured out how that's going to work.
So do women get exalted? How do they become exalted in heaven?
They're only exalted if their husband decides that he's going to pull them in through into heaven so they can be with him in eternity. And guess what? In eternity, they get to do. They get to have as many babies as they can throughout eternity while he is off getting more and more and more wives and peopling the whole planet. But they'll be a goddess, honey. They'll get to wear a little crown and they'll be a goddess. So when I found out that eternity was just the same hell as it was here on earth, I said, please, dear God, don't send me to hell. I've already been there.
Yeah. So it's fear that really keeps people in these things.
Yes, of course.
Fear of damnation, fear of...
Faith and fear are very confused in these cults.
Yeah.
Our God was so mean that the devil was on unemployment and could only get a part-time job as a scapegoat. The poor dude, you know, he could not keep up with the wrath and brutality of our God.
Right, right.
Impossible.
Right. You talked about an incident when you were approximately 11.
Yes, I did.
Do you mind talking about it? It was a very painful image for me. You on a bed, talking to God. And you were, as you described it, if this is correct, in a pool of blood, your own blood you had been perpetrated on by your own husband.
No, this was my stepfather.
Holy crap, this was your stepfather?
Yeah.
He did this to you.
Yes.
And then they tried to blame you.
Well, of course. That's always the woman's fault. We were taught that if we were not virgins when we got married, that we were no good. We could never be married in the temple. Not that we could. We were not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but our people were doing the temple rituals outside the church. And we could be never good enough to be married in the temple. Never good enough to reach the highest degree of glory, that we would be nothing but servants throughout eternity, unless, of course, we had our bloodshed for our evil sin of not being a virgin when we got married. When I was 11 years old, my stepfather violently beat me. He dragged me by the hair of my head till he pulled my hair out by the handfuls. He knocked out part of this eyebrow, created scars that I still have today.
Which I can't see.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. You're beautiful, I just want to say. Yeah.
However, I thought he would kill me. I was fighting for my life, because if I lived, I was going to be damned and a servant for eternity and never fit for heaven.
What started
so I was
that?
hoping.
What started the beating in the first place?
He was a nut. That's the only thing I can think of. He was
Boomerest took over.
the guy was a nut.
Yeah.
I mean, what can a skinny little 11-year-old girl do to get that kind of violence from a 48-year-old man and deserve it?
Yeah.
What can a child like that do? A child that would be afraid to even talk back or be disobedient because it wasn't allowed. What could they do? Nothing.
Right.
So he beat me severely, and I fought.
Good for you.
I fought.
Good.
And he dragged me up the stairs, and he tied me to an old iron bed. He tied this arm and this leg, and he raped me. And when his weight came down, he pulled my hip out of place and twisted my back. If you saw the x-rays, you would see that it's still that way.
Oh, damn.
And I thought that I would die, but I didn't. My sin was that I lived. I survived despite it all.
Yeah. Good for you, though, damn it. I'm sorry, damn it.
When my mom came home, I was sitting in a pool of blood. And I know now, as an adult, that she was in a state of shock. I know that. But as a child, I did not know that. My mom just kind of went spacey, and she went over and she got the Journal of Discourses, and volume 4 has a lot of the blood covenants in it.
Yeah,
and
you talked about that, the blood covenant.
And she sat down and she started reading those blood covenants and crying. And so I waited for them to come and kill me. I waited for my death. I fully believed that the only way I could be saved was to be murdered, to have my throat slit from ear to ear and have the blood drain out on the ground as an incense to God to save my sinful soul. Oh, wow. And so I waited. For 3 days, I waited.
3 days?
I never had any medical attention. I needed it. It was 3 days. And I waited for them to come and kill me. But, you know, I prayed a lot. And as I look back, I realized that I spoke to God like a young attorney, because I didn't get it. If I asked God, I said, if you're a just God, Mama says you're just.
Yeah.
If you're a just God, why do I have to die for a crime committed on me? Now, God, you gave me life.
Right.
You can take it. It's not mine. It's the gift you gave me. You can take it anytime you want. But I only ask one thing. Give me wisdom.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Yeah.
Dear God, give me wisdom. Tell me why. Why must I die for a sin committed on me? And you know, the crazy thing is, at 11 years old, I knew in that moment that a just God would not do that. And I knew that the God of my people was not God. And I had no outside influence to help me with this. It just made no sense. So I said to God, God, if you let me live, if you choose to let me live, I promise you, if you will open the door for me, I'll have the courage to walk through it. And I have kept that promise.
You are standing before me, girl. Yes, you have walked through loud and proud.
So that is what happened. That man that raped me was not my husband, he was my stepfather. And he was held totally unaccountable, nothing was ever done. And as far as the family was concerned, it didn't happen, and I was a liar. However, since I have been interviewing kids, when I say kids, I mean adults that were polygamous kids.
Right.
I found most of them were sexually violated. That the sexual crimes are very high against children in polygamy worldwide. The greatest statistics on this were done in the Canadian court case worldwide. And here's the thing. It's a real easy synopsis. The degree of crime against human rights is always in direct proportion to the distance between the entitled and the unentitled. And in polygamy, women and children get less and less and less and less entitled, so the crime goes up. Because who's going to stop it? Who's going to look into it? If the man's God and he's God's mouthpiece on earth and he can damn you or destroy you, who's going to stop it?
Yeah.
What kind of a man would do that wasn't narcissistic?
Yeah.
And that believed in human rights?
Right.
That's the whole point. What kind of a human being would do that? A narcissistic human being.
Yeah.
Who cared about nothing except himself and his own greed and power. So polygamy attracts these guys. They come out of the woodwork. They come out of the woodwork like crazy. It has a lot of people that are child molesters, and it works for them. Why not? They can hide the name of religion and everything's covered up.
Wow. This just takes my breath away. It really takes my breath away.
A lot of people say, well, golly, there's sister wives and all of these things on TV, that isn't always the case. Well, let's talk about sister wives.
Yeah, that's why you're here, to kind of give us a whole new perspective.
I was raised in the AUB, that's the Apostolic United Brethren.
Okay.
That's the same group the sister wives belong to. They're my relatives. Cody and I share a maternal grandmother, and his wife Christine is my second cousin, and they were raised with the same indoctrination I'm telling you right now, and they stand up before the world and say polygamy is a choice, their choice. Now, they're not lying, and they are lying, and let me explain why.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I was told that I would live polygamy obediently, or I would be damned. And the only way I could be saved was through blood atonement. And then I was told, now listen, you have your free agency. You can choose. Are you going to live polygamy or suffer the consequences? Because we do want to save your soul. That's like holding a gun to your head and saying, are you going to do as I say, or do I pull the trigger? So when you look at those girls on Sister Wives, don't judge them too hard.
No, of course not.
They are doing what they've been taught to do all their life, and if they have pain and heartache and they don't hide it, they're evil. That's what they've been taught. Of course they're going to get up there and say we love each other, even if it's killing them. You want to know how they really feel? They would feel exactly the same way that Cody would feel if he only had one mate forever and had to watch her or listen to her take a brother husband to bed in the next room every night. That's how they feel. Now, if he had to go through that, he'd kill somebody because it would be his right. Her right, she has none.
Right.
She is a breedable commodity.
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 What a word to place on a woman, a commodity.
Well, that's what she is.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Many of the child brides, and women in general, but particularly child brides, are bartered off for power, for gain of some kind. Warren Jeffs had so many of them. Somebody sent me a picture of Warren's 57 or 58 young brides, and I looked them up in the family genealogy book, and all of them were related to me on my mother's side of the family except one, in their surname. Now, people say this isn't going on.
Yeah.
So wrong.
Yeah.
When I was a child, there were hundreds of kids like me. My story's not unique. Today there are thousands. They do it because it works. It's not something of yesteryear.
Right.
Women are losing their rights.